First of all, I'm sorry to hear that your good friend Christopher Kelly passed away over the weekend. When was the last time you spoke to him?
Thanksgiving night, he called me, surprisingly, Thanksgiving night, just to kind of talk a little bit.
So that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, and before that, he had chosen to sort of kind of leave the political world maybe a year or year and a half before that, because he was disillusioned by what had befallen him, and now, of course, he's apparently taken his own life. And the story behind that is because he did some wrong things. He acknowledged the wrongdoing. He was involved in some criminal activity that had nothing to do with me or my administration. It had to do with contracts at O'Hare Airport, which come under the purview of Mayor Daley and not my administration. He honed up to that, admitted that in court, and pled guilty to those things. But evidently the prosecutors were pressuring him to lie about me, and he refused to do so, and notwithstanding the fact that he would have been able to receive a significantly reduced sentence, he honored the truth, and when he did something wrong, he said he did it wrong, but he wouldn't lie just because he was pressured to do it, and he chose, because of the pressure he was under, to rather than do that prison time, and maybe more that they were threatening him with, he decided to take his own life and leave behind 3 little girls and a wife, and I'm deeply saddened and feel just awful about the whole situation.
Well, he was actually the only holdout. Later we'll talk about some of the people who have agreed to cooperate. But going back to December 9th, 2008, I'd like to play a clip from U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald in which he lays out the first of 3 announcements about your conduct while in office.
I will give you one example. A month or so ago, a $1.8 billion tollway project was announced. And while that tollway project was being announced, Governor Blagojevich was privately seeking to have a person benefiting from that contract raise $100,000 in contributions. And privately, the government said, I could have made a larger announcement, but wanted to see how they would perform by the end of the year. If they don't perform, bleep them. That's a quote. And the word bleep was not the word he used.
So he was quoting from a tape recording of a conversation of yours?
Well, he quoted from several conversations, and he took out of context snippets of those conversations at that press conference.
Well, what did he get wrong there?
He got a lot wrong. He got the context wrong. And then what he did was he went into court and got a protective order which prohibits me from telling you what the full context of that conversation is, much less giving you a chance or the public a chance to hear the whole conversation and all the conversations, so you can fully understand the nature of the conversations and what the talk was about. And I would remind you and your listeners that talking about things, exploring ideas, and discussing things, however stupid they may be, are not crimes.
Well, he played the complete tapes to the grand jury, didn't he? And they found them compelling enough to indict you. You're saying that this was just you, going over some possible ideas rather than saying, I definitely want to do this?
Again, I wish I could tell you the full context of the conversation. There'll be a chance, hopefully, in court to be able to do that. That obviously is an unflattering characterization, how he said that. I'm not even sure it was exactly how he said it. Let me simply say this, and this will characterize why this story is upside down. That very day, after he had me arrested at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I write in my book that the morning before I had decided on a United States Senate pick, I had directed my chief of staff to work out a political deal that was very routine, and Rahm Emanuel, the new president's chief of staff, was involved. Other U.S. senators were willing to help us. In other words, we would create jobs through investment in public works, expand health care for 50,000 to 300,000 working people, and we'd have a commitment not to raise the income tax on people in Illinois. In exchange for that, I was going to appoint the Illinois Attorney General, Lisa Madigan, whose father is the House Speaker, who was blocking all these initiatives. Personally painful to me, yet it was the best deal I can get for the people of Illinois. He said at that press conference that he had me arrested to stop a crime spree before it happened. I'm quoting him. And that Abraham Lincoln would roll over in his grave. That's a flat-out mutilation of the truth. It is not true. The morning before, over the telephone, that was the direction I gave. That was an act, and that was a decision. And the irony here is that my accuser goes into court after he takes those conversations out of context and slaughters me in the media and creates a sensational storm that leads to the unseating of a governor elected twice by the people. He does that and prohibits me from telling you what those conversations are, or even having you or the media hear all those conversations.
Well, could you talk to the grand jury about them?
No. As you know, grand juries are one-sided. Nobody cross-examines anybody. There's an old saying, I'm a former prosecutor. You can indict a ham sandwich at a grand jury. You can just have people say things and no one contradicts it, and that's the end of it.
You begin Chapter 3 by writing in all caps, I come out of Chicago politics, out of the remnants of the old Chicago Democratic political machine. That machine was first built in the late 1920s and the early 1930s by the George Washington of the Democratic machine, Mayor Anton Cermak. Then you go on to explain that Cermak was it Cermak or Chermak?
Well, I've always known him as Cermak because there's a road named after him called Cermak Road. So it could have been Chermak, but I wasn't born.
Well, I guess in the old world it would have been Chermak. He was assassinated while he was in Florida, but then he built a political machine that was held together, you say, by a patronage system that rewarded political work like canvassing neighborhoods for votes with government jobs. So does that justify whatever activities you might have engaged in? Are you saying that that they're just business as usual?
Well, let me be clear. I'm not looking for any justification for any of my behavior because I didn't do anything wrong. I never violated a law. I never intended to violate a law. If I'm guilty of anything that's consistent with what was said in those tapes is that I've used profanity in private conversations. I acknowledge that. But under no circumstances was any crime committed by me, nor was it ever intended to be committed by me. And again, when you hear the conversations in their full context, you'll have a better appreciation of it. I wrote that just to give the readers a little bit of background on the Chicago Democratic political world that I came out of. And as a student of history, I wrote about the Cermak organization, which was a prelude to the one that Mayor Daley's father built up in a more modern era, and that this particular Mayor Daley still in some respects is sort of the head of.
Well, why even mention it if you have nothing to do with the sort of thing that Cermak was involved with?
Well, I mention it again because I'm telling...
you come out of that, the remnants of that machine.
It's a memoir, as you say, and therefore a bit of your life stories in it. The reality is my political career began because I fell in love with a ward boss's daughter. My wife Patty's father is a Chicago alderman, one of those ward chieftains in the Byzantine politics of Chicago, and that's where my political career began, sort of unexpected, and I described that in the book further on in that chapter, I think.
Yeah, he's not talking to you anymore. Is that true?
No, we have a strained relationship. He spent Christmas Eve with us, but I write in the book about that's the Shakespearean part of the story, a part of it anyway, and that is that, part of being governor is you have to make hard decisions. And I had a decision relating to a landfill that my father-in-law was involved in where he was going to benefit financially. We had learned, information came to me, that he was operating without the proper permits. I could have chosen to do what they do in Illinois politics and probably a lot of other places, look the other way and allow a member of my family to profit from it. And I knew, because threats were coming my way, that if I acted as I did, there would be consequences to pay. Yet I did my public duty, closed the landfill down. It went to court. The court sustained what we did. They got their permits. They went back in business. An angry father-in-law then accused Chris Kelly, my late friend, of selling board and commission appointments in exchange for campaign contributions. He retracted that false accusation under a threat of a lawsuit, but that began, I believe, the scrutiny that both of us became under, and it became, I think, such an effort that these prosecutors felt they needed to do something to justify all the work they did for 4 years.